Okay, so today we're starting a new unit, and our new unit is titled Pythagorean Theorem and Special Right Triangles. So the first thing we need to cover is something that you should already know, but I'm going to re-emphasize it, and you're going to learn a little more about it, and that is the Pythagorean Theorem itself. Now the Pythagorean Theorem simply states that the sum of the squares of the legs of a right triangle are equal to the square of the hypotenuse. Let me finish writing that real quick. Otherwise known as a squared plus b squared equals c squared, where a and b are the legs and c is your hypotenuse. Now your hypotenuse is your longest side, and how you can always find the longest side is you go from that right angle, and it points right at the hypotenuse every time. It's always across from the right angle. Now, a squared plus b squared equals c squared is the original Pythagorean theorem formula. But when it comes to us solving for certain sides of a right triangle, we aren't solving for c squared or a squared or b squared. So there's some shortcuts I'd like you to learn. So if they want us to solve for the hypotenuse, which is c, you would simply do the square root of a squared plus b squared. Now, if they wanted you to solve for a leg, like say leg A, it would be the square root of your hypotenuse, c squared, minus the other leg squared, b squared. Same thing if you were solving for b, except now you're going to do your hypotenuse squared minus a squared. Okay? These are real good shortcuts for you to learn. Basically, if they give you c, you subtract. If they don't give you c, you add. Okay? So let's look at example 1 here. If two legs of triangle ABC are 12 and 35, okay? Legs means not the hypotenuse. Okay? 12 and 35. What's the length of its hypotenuse? So simply they want c. So c would be the square root of 12 squared plus 35 squared, which would simply be, let me type it in real quick because I'm not a human calculator, 37. And units, of course, is inches. Please don't forget those units. Okay, now let's look at example 2. If one leg of triangle ABC, it's a right triangle, right? We're still using this triangle. I'm just redrawing it. If one of my legs is 20 and the hypotenuse is 29, what's the other leg? Well, now, let's just say they're looking for B. Now they want B. I'm given the hypotenuse. I am given C, so I always subtract from C. So I'm going to do C, which is 29 squared, minus the other leg squared, 20 squared. Okay? And I get that it is 21 feet. Okay? Okay. So far, so good. That is Pythagorean theorem. Now look at this next example. Example 3 here says find the area of this triangle. Now you have to know the area of a triangle is base times height divided by 2. The height of a triangle is also known as the altitude. So if I look here, I know my base is 16, but I don't know my height. So calculating my area, is going to be a little hard unless I know my height, right? So what I have to do is I have to look. This is an isosceles triangle because 17 and 17 here says these two sides are the same. The altitude of an isosceles triangle cuts the bottom base in half, which means this one leg right here is 8. So to find my height, I know that they gave me the hypotenuse because this is a right triangle right here, right? This right here that I'm highlighting with purple is half of the isosceles, which your altitude is always at a right angle, so this is also a right angle. Okay, so I have a leg and I have C, my C. So I'm given C, so I have to do the square root of C squared, 17 squared, minus the other leg, 8 squared. And that would give me a height of 15. Now that I have my height and I have my base of 16, this is my base, okay, I can find my area simply by doing 16 times 15 and dividing that by 2. And that gives me 120 meters squared. Okay. I know we haven't gotten into area yet, but that is how you would find your area. Alright, now you can also use the Pythagorean theorem to find the distance between 2 points. For example here, I have points A and B. If I were to draw a line between them, it would look like this. Okay. Now what I want to do is I want to create a right triangle using the endpoints of this segment. So the first thing I'm going to do is draw my up and down line for my right triangle. Then draw my side-to-side line for my triangle. Okay. By doing this, I have now created a right triangle. Okay. How you do Pythagorean theorem is you simply count how much up and down. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this is 5. This side is 5. Then you count side to side. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7. And now I've got A and I've got B. They're looking for C, so I do my Pythagorean theorem, square root of, I'm looking for C, so I add 5 squared plus 7 squared. So square root of 5 squared plus 7 squared is, oh, this is not even. I want 3 places after the decimal, so 8.602 would be my answer. Okay, let's do it again. They want the length of PQ. If P is at -3, so 1, 2, 3, positive 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Here's -3, 5 right here. And at 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Okay. So looking at that, my line goes straight across right there. So to create my right triangle, I just go down until I meet where it meets with the horizontal. That is 1, 2, 2, and this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5. Again, they're looking for C. So C would be square root of 2 squared plus 5 squared. So let me type that in my calculator real quick, which would give me 3 places after decimal, 5.385. Okay? So it's pretty cool. You don't have to use that long distance formula. You can just do Pythagorean theorem if you have a graph and are able to use the graph. Alright, now we're going to talk about what's called the converse of the Pythagorean theorem. If you remember when we talked about converse, converse means you switch it. So instead of saying a triangle is a right triangle if a squared plus b squared equals c squared, the converse would say if in a triangle a squared plus b squared equals c squared, then it's a right triangle. So if I said if c squared equals a squared plus b squared, then the triangle must be a right triangle. So it must be right. Okay? If c squared does not equal a squared plus b squared, then the triangle cannot be right. It must be acute or obtuse. And the way you can find this out is real simple. Remember, C is your longest side, okay? Remember that if c squared equals a squared plus b squared, then your triangle's a right triangle, okay? Now, if you do c squared and you compare it to a squared plus b squared and it comes out that c squared is smaller, then it's acute. Now, if it turns out that c squared ends up being bigger than a squared plus b squared, then it's obtuse. Okay? Simple enough? I hope you're following along in your notes because this is very important. Alright, so there you go. That's the end of the notes. That's all you're learning today. So now I want you to take and apply this to your homework, which, let me import it here real quick and we will work on it. Okay. Here it is. So if you look here at number 1 and number 2, they want you to find the unknown side lengths, which is the x here and here, which is simply, if you look at this one, if you cut it here, you can make a right triangle. This would be 11, right? Because it's the same as this over here. Then you can do 5 is up here, so down here, this part's 5. So 16 minus 5, this is also 11. Okay? So now you've got what you need. You can do x would equal square root of 11 squared plus 11 squared. You're adding because they want the hypotenuse. This is C. Okay? Always identify your C first. Moving on down, if you see here, you're still going to be using Pythagorean theorem. Then they want you to find the area by taking the base and multiplying it by the height. Okay? Here, they just want perimeter. Again, cut this into a square or a rectangle and a right triangle and work your magic. The last part of your assignment, the last part of this page of your assignment is finding distance using your 2 coordinates. Now, you can also use the distance formula, but I would recommend try doing it using the graph. Because the distance formula is square root of x1 minus x2 squared plus y1 minus y2 squared. Okay? You can use that if you want, or you can graph it and use Pythagorean theorem. Okay? For 9, draw a picture if they don't provide one, then answer the questions below to the nearest tenth. And that continues on to the back to number 10, number 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Okay? So please remember to use your Pythagorean theorem, which you should already know, and work on the rest of the assignment for the rest of the class period.